Hi, this is Anna Imagination with a Healing Garden. Welcome to Shifting Perspectives. And if you are new to my channel, I am a philosopher, psychologist, sociologist of 30 years. And I am at the moment breaking down internalization and projection. So I'm going to go ahead and do something that's just my logic says to me, break them apart. They're unrelated. And I'm going, really? They're unrelated? And it feels right and it feels good and it gives me joy. So let's do it. Let's separate internalization and projection for a minute. And the reason why I'm saying this is because I've seen many cases, too many cases, that tell me that projection is people can both project and internalize at the same time. So I'm beginning to think that they're actually not related at all. Now, I just went through a video where I talked about and dissected internalization. Internalization makes so much more sense. It is basically Internalization is basically the core belief that if I can't protect myself in the present moment, then I will protect myself in the future. So the individual, and it's based off of the concept that it is not safe to make mistakes. And it leads to inhuman expectations on the self and perfectionism. So, and then that leads to guaranteed failure and then disappointment, self-loathing, and it's a cycle. That cycle makes absolute logical sense if you just look at internalization. But when you start to throw projection into it, the whole thing doesn't make sense. That's where the illogic, the cognitive dissonance screams, because we're trying to cram projection into something that might not actually have anything to do with internalization. So let's separate projection and internalization. Let's set that aside. The concept is that a person either projects or they internalizes. Now, here's a clue. Every time you get an either or statement, that's a red flag for black and white trauma thinking. Every time. So I'm going to listen to the logic on this one, as always, and I'm going to remove projection from the whole concept and just set it aside. So if we were to look at just internalization, now when you have a boundary basically is the process of taking internalization and assigning responsibility over to that individual. Oh, yes, I feel it now. There's something going on here. I can feel it. It's already started to just click, click, click right into place. So a person internalizes, oh, yes, these are not opposites. These are not opposites. My God, I can see it already. So I'm going to go ahead and click down here below onto edit. Yeah. So the theory, the thesis is that internalization and projection are not opposites. Not at all. Because you can do both. In fact, there's a lot of cases where you can do both. Now, internalization is basically the accepting, you're going to love this, accepting responsibility of others, of the emotions of others, in an attempt to predict an outcome, to prevent or to secure safety. So when your defense is low, actually, internalization is a learning process of embedding a lesson into our cognitive core. That is actually what internalization is. But when we are traumatized, internalization becomes accepting responsibility of the emotions of others in an attempt to predict an outcome to secure safety. So it's not really accepting responsibility so much as it is trying to control another person's, always about control, emotions by in an attempt to secure one's safety. Secure your safety. Control. So accepting responsibility, controlling another person's emotions in an attempt to secure your safety. Controlling another person's emotions by altering your own behavior strategically in an attempt to secure your own safety of the emotions of others in an attempt to protect an outcome. And we do this by accepting the responsibility. See, I don't know if it's accepting the responsibility. That's what they told us it was. But I'm looking at it going, are we really accepting the responsibility of others? Now, that is the traditional psychiatry jargon. And I'm beginning to question that that's incorrect. I'm really, well, of course, why every time, I need to not use any of the material. So when we internalize, learning process of embedding a lesson into our cognitive core, that is internalized. So you internalize a lesson. Controlling another person's emotions by altering your own behavior strategically in an attempt to secure your safety. This is the process of internalization. And we do this by accepting responsibility of the emotions of others. I don't believe we are accepting the responsibility of the emotions of others. Guilt does that, but this is not internalizing. Guilt does that. Guilt is accepting responsibility of the emotions of others in an attempt to predict an outcome to secure safety. That is not internalization. Internalization is being motivated through guilt. There it is. Guilt and internalization. Those are my bed partners. Guilt and internalization, when combined, that's it. Guilt fuses with internalization. And that checks out because every person who struggles with addiction and or depression, self-loathing, struggles with guilt. That is the problem. That is the emotion. This isn't about internalization. This is a new cocktail when guilt merges and infuses itself to internalization. So internalization becomes guilt motivated. Internalization becomes guilt motivated. There it is. So guilt hijacks the learning center. Guilt hijacks the defense system. Bingo. Hence, addictions. Wow. Hence, borderline personality disorder. And the beautiful emotion, disappointment. There it is, people. All right, now that's internalization finished. Definitely guilt. Guilt is fused with internalizing. So it's the guilt that's disguised as internalizing. Guilt. Wow. Wow. Guilt is that's beautiful. Well done, fear system. Very clever. Kudos to you. Now let's take a look at projection. Now, projection. I were to actually look at what projection is, it reminds me of anger. It's defense. Internalization is not a defense system. There it is. Internalization, is part of the cognitive core. Yes, it is. Internalization is part of the cognitive core. Projection is part of the defense system. There's the disconnect. They have nothing at all to do with each other. There it is. Internalization is embedded into our cognitive core processing. Whenever we get data, any kind of data point that comes into our brains, it goes into our cognitive core. We have 5 compartments within our cognitive core. Our cognitive core is the logical flow of logical argument and debate that produces a perspective. So you have your identity, what you love, what you ethically believe, what you ethically value, that form, when those two things merge, it forms your beliefs. And then those beliefs combined with what you love and what you value give you your name. It gives you your identity. And then those 4 things create your perspective. And this is your logical truth. This is your logic. Now, when you have a belief that comes in, it corrupts, in most cases, your belief system. And that's where you get cognitive dissonance. Oh, there is data in here that is contradicting to our logical argument. So it creates an offshoot called an invasive perspective. Now, this is where mental illness comes from. It's a logical fallacy. This is cognitive dissonance. It's when you have an invasive perspective that exists, coexisting, in addition to your illogical fallacy. I'm sorry, your logical core truth. So you have your logical core truth with this illogical fallacy. And the two of them, the contradiction hurts. So then you suppress your identity, you develop amnesia, where the subconscious mind removes the core logic and embeds it. That way it tries to correct for the logical fallacy, prioritizing the logical fallacy over your logical truth. And that's all it is. It is literally a battle of wits. I love the brain. So you basically have this war going on between logic versus illogic, and they both can't be right. That's the logical fallacy. So the subconscious mind tries to make it right by basically favoring one over the other. Depending upon which one it favors is going to depend on what you prioritize. And what you prioritize, if you are a people pleaser, you will prioritize the illogic and the logical fallacy over the logical core truth, because there is a threat. If you prioritize the self, then you will never have a mental illness. You will never have an illogical fallacy, because you will rely on and trust and love and nurture your logical core truth. Now, in the case of a boundary, basically a boundary is a division of responsibility. It is a shield. It prevents you from internalizing, which basically goes over the cognitive core. It prevents you from internalizing, and you have something else called your defense system. Now, your defense system is where the emotions anger come from. It is where the emotion discomfort comes from. It is literally the thing that detects illogic. We're going to call the defense system the illogic detector. That's what it is, 100%. The defense is the illogic detector. God, this makes so much more sense. So when logic is detected, you get confused. Confused is a red flag. You should never be confused unless you're in a math class. If you are confused, if you have discomfort, if you have anger, if you are annoyed, if you are bothered, if you are frustrated, all of these emotions are literally levels of red flags and warning signs to tell you when illogic has been detected. Now, the way anger works, which is the last stage, the final red flag stage, there are 3 stages to anger. The first stage is violence. The next stage is communication. And the third stage is change. Dun, dun, dun. So if you want to change your situation, you need to get angry and elevate the anger above and to the state of change. I call this the breaking point. Now, in depression, we have something called rock bottom. And the fallacy at the moment is that psychologists believe that rock bottom is where change happens. That is where people die. Rock bottom is where people commit suicide or where the drug kills you. This is not a good place to be. Change does not happen at rock bottom, which is why the suicide rate is so low. Logical fallacy. Where change actually takes place is the breaking point within anger. So current psychology practices. Oh, you're depressed? Enable or don't enable the addict. Let them hit rock bottom. That way they will change. So you abandon the person with abandonment issues. They self-loathe, hate themselves. They drink more until the alcohol/drug kills them. And that's why the statistics are where they are, to prove all of this shit. And the thing that they need is actually anger, because that's you saying, I value and prioritize myself. You're not going to get angry if you don't love yourself. So if you want change, you have to learn first how to love yourself. In order to love yourself, once you love yourself, that's when your defense starts to kick on, and that's when you get angry. One of the first signs in therapy of somebody healing is when they hit the anger stage. When you find somebody who hits the anger stage, it's just downhill from there. You go, yes, thank God. Finally, they're angry. Now change is going to happen. Now they're going to see progress. Now, but you got to get angry. Because anger is the first sign that you love yourself, because that's what your defense system is. It's waking up going, how dare they hurt me? Yeah, good, right, exactly. But we have a little problem inside of our brains. We associate anger with violence. And in most cases, we are pacifists. We don't want to be like our abuser. So we have this massive thing in our brain that associates anger with violence. And so to avoid violence, we ban anger. Buddhists are very common with this. And this is where I have a severe problem with Buddhism, is because they actively practice to avoid anger. A lot of people actively practice avoiding anger, but anger is where that breaking point is. Anger is where the point of change is. Anger is what happens when you finally love yourself enough to give a shit, to go to war, to defend the self, which isn't happening if you're not even getting angry. And if you don't love yourself, you're never going to get angry. You're going to constantly dismiss everything, and people can treat you like shit because you don't give a shit about yourself. Anger is fantastic. It is my favorite emotion. So that being said, when you finally shift your priority over to the self, you allow for these defense emotions to come in, being bothered, frustrated, anger, annoyed, discomfort, confused. Now, here is where I'm looking at projection. If I didn't know better, and I do, projection is actually a kind of violence. %100%. Because you can project onto yourself and you can project onto others. In fact, I see that all the time. Now, something else is going on when you project. You are actually mirroring, which is very interesting to me. That just turns my logical brain so on to that mirroring, reciprocity. There is something there buried in the logic, and I'm going, ooh, what's that? So projection is actually the defense system. Now let's take a look at the 3 stages of anger. So it goes confusion, it goes discomfort. Confusion is different. Confusion is when processing is paused. It's actually a very, very dangerous state to be in. Confusion is dangerous because when you are confused, your entire subconscious mind shuts down and goes, I don't know what's going on here. I need leadership. And you trust an abuser, usually a gaslighter, who's caused the confusion to begin with. And while you're confused and your defense is down, the abuser then swoops in and gives you an answer, which is most likely going to harm you and benefit them. And boom, that's how narcissists get in. So confusion is actually a side effect of tampering with your defense system, which is why I said it's a red flag emotion. If you feel confusion, get the fuck out. There's something wrong. When you feel confused, the best solution is to pause and get alone. 100% get alone. You need to consult other people, people you trust, people who are solid, more people. This is where you need a community for advice because they will be able to put it straight. But do not go to the person who confused you. Never go to the person who confused you. Because in most cases, they are a narcissist who strategically used confusion to pull down your defenses. And that's how they get in. So if confusion isn't actually an issue, you have discomfort, being bothered. It's bothering. Bothering is like level 1. Like right now, I'm bothered. Something's bugging me. So being bothered or being bugged is like level 1 of something's not logically right. By the way, this is all the emotion cognitive core. This is cognitive core or cognitive dissonance. I'm sorry. So you're bothered or you're bugged. Then you go into frustration. After frustration, you get into you're annoyed by something. Now, all of these things are uncomfortable. And then you get to the 4th stage, which is anger. So it goes bugged, bothered, frustrated, annoyed, and then anger. Now, once you get to angry, anger has 3 stages. You have, and which stage you go to is going to depend upon your ethics. Ba-dum-bum. If you are in stages 1 through 4, you're going to project. Oh. Oh. Okay. So there's the answer to my own question. I love logic because when the logic kicks in, it just carries it over through the most logical deduction. So there you go. Occam's razor. So levels, if you are at levels 1 through 4, you're going to project. So projection is actually anger. It's not violence and aggression. That is one type. You can become violent. You can become angry. Or I'm sorry, you can become aggressive. You can also become passive aggressive. That's projecting. So passive aggression is also another part of this. Okay. Now, there we go. Oh, this makes so much more sense. So you project. That is 1 through 4. Okay. If you are a 5 to 8, then you will communicate. And if you are a 7 plus, you're going to change. So when you experience anger, it's going to be completely dependent upon where your ethical growth is, your stages of growth. And the most violent, the physically aggressive, those are your level 3s. Level 3 aggressor are 100% the people who are violent. Those are your narcissists. Once you get into levels 5 and 8, 5 through 8, you're going to communicate. That's going to become your default mode. Let's communicate this. But there's going to be a third evolution, and that's your top tier of anger, and that's where you change. Now, to change, you're going to look at problem solving and data analysis. Now, if you are at like 5, 6, 7, you're going to communicate unproductively. You're still going to try and communicate, but you're going to communicate unproductively. So where you want to be is problem solving with data analysis. So I'm going to put here ineffective communication. And the reason why it's ineffective is because you can communicate and you're kind of shooting in the dark unless you have knowledge. This is where you really need conscious awareness so you know what it is you're supposed to be doing with your anger. There you go. So projection is actually a stage of anger. It's a defense mechanism. That's what it is. And that has nothing to do with internalization. Internalization is your cognitive core learning at an exponential rate, working with your fear system to make sure that you are getting one step. Basically, you are focused on staying one step ahead. One step ahead. That's the mindset of somebody who internalizes. I got to keep one step ahead. I got to keep one step ahead. And it literally maintains that constant keeping yourself in this inhuman expectation. There you go. Inhuman expectation. So when you are looking at anger and violence, what you are actually looking at, or when you're looking at projection, what you're actually dealing with is literally the stages of anger, where you are focused on projecting outward. Now, here's the thing is you can project upon yourself or you can project onto other people. Now, this is where all the ways we can project. And I'm still focused on that reciprocity, also that mirroring. Like that's something that just keeps. I'm gonna dive even deeper into this because this is like get in here now. Let's get into this. So I'm gonna shut this down. We're gonna restart another one here shortly, and then I'm going to really dissect that mirroring and reciprocity, and I'm going to really dissect when we project onto the self and all the ways that we project. All the ways that we project. So yeah, separating projection and internalization was a phenomenal idea because they are absolutely not related. I have seen so many people where they internalize and project, and that was the clue. That's like, wait a minute, if it's an either or, like psychology says, internalize or project, that either or black and white thinking, then I'm looking at it going, well, that doesn't make sense because then why would a person internalize and project? Because I saw that, well, to be blunt, I was dissecting narcissism and I noticed that narcissists internalize and they project. And I went, well, that's really fascinating. How is it that narcissists are internalizing? That is really fascinating. So when I looked closer into a narcissist internalizing, I realized, well, into a narcissist behavior, I realized that a narcissist does both internalize and project. Whereas a borderline personality disorder person will internalize, and then project, and then internalize. Someone with addiction and a lack of the first perspective will internalize. They will internalize themselves to death. Literally, unfortunately, they will internalize themselves to death. And when they project onto themselves. That was interesting. They internalized and projected both onto themselves. Whereas a borderline person will internalize, project onto the self, internalize, project onto the self, project onto the other person, internalize, project onto the self, which is why they jump back and forth. Whereas a narcissist will internalize, 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 and project, project, project. So it's like everybody's internalizing. And depending upon how you project, depends upon where you fall in the spectrum. If you are significantly depressed with an alcoholic addiction, substance abuse problem, binge eating, you are also projecting onto yourself and self-attacking, self-martyrdom, self-attack. And if you're borderline personality disorder, you're toggling both sides, where you are internalizing this way and you are also projecting inward onto yourself. And on occasion, you will have these outbursts where you will also attack the other person as a last-minute defense. The narcissist will only project onto other people, but they'll also project onto themselves and they will internalize. But then they'll again project. There's so much projecting. So the narcissist is almost 100% projecting onto other people, whereas the empath is projecting onto the self. So when an empath messes up, so to speak, according to their logic, they project and the narcissist project. So it's like they get a double blast of narcissists projecting and they're projecting onto themselves. So they're getting hit with double the amount of exposure, which is why an empath gets so depressed so quickly. It's because they've got two people attacking them, the self and the outward appearance. And with borderline, like I said, they're all over the place. They're both, because they're internalizing, they're self-projecting, and they're going that projecting, and then they're hating themselves and projecting on themselves for projecting out to others as well. So you've got the full spectrum here of internalization and projecting. But internalizing is I'm going to hold myself responsible, not responsible. The not responsible. It is strategically trying to control. This is about control. And that's the other thing, is internalizing is about seeking control. Projection, there you go. Internalizing is about control. Projection is about a defense mechanism. You're not looking to control, you're looking to protect. Projection is all about its defense, which means it happens after the pain. It's after pain. Whereas internalizing is trying to predict the pain. It's pre-pain. So with internalizing, it's pre-paying, trying to exist in the future so that you prevent. It's preventative. Internalizing is preventative, whereas projection is absolutely in the now. It's right here, trying to take back, trying to undo the past. So it's almost that you're living in the past or in the present trying to address a situation, but an internalizer is living in the future trying to control situations, other people's emotions, so that they can get the safest outcome for themselves. So that's the difference between internalizing and projecting. They're absolutely unrelated on so many levels because you can have so many different variations of this. But again, projection is a branch of the defense system that's linked into anger. And then internalization goes back into that cognitive core, and it's that learning system. There it is. If you love shit like this, like, subscribe, follow, comment below. Let me know what part of the show resonates with you. And if you want to learn more about my offers and what I do, take a look at my Linktree account below. Thank you so much, and may the kindest of words always find you.